In this issue of our Be Well, Lead Well interview series on thriving leadership, we begin with a provocative question. What if growth isn't about climbing up, but about going deep? In my conversation with global hospitality and tourism leader, Aradhana Khowala, she challenges the traditional metrics of success used by leaders, by organizations, and by whole nations. Plus, she invites us to reconsider where thriving leadership truly exists. It's often in the margins and the fringes, where leaders are quietly transforming their corners of the world. Her insights offer all of us a timely opportunity to pause and to reconsider what truly matters on our leadership journey. I hope you enjoy it. So, Aradhana, I am just really delighted. I was really looking forward to the conversation today about thriving leadership. As I mentioned to you, there's so many stresses, so many imbalances in the world today. And we believe from WisdomWorks that there's a whole new paradigm of leadership that is not only needed, but it is emerging around the world. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I know that you are a global leader in the tourism and hospitality industries, and you have been all around the world working with leaders in every sector. So I want to ask you questions about what do you think it means to thrive as human beings on this planet, and what kind of leadership is going to serve us best where we are today with the level of stresses and imbalances and movements toward well-being. What do you think it means to thrive as a human being during this time in our world?
It's an interesting question because we are, what I say is, in perma-crisis mode as we speak, right? There's so much happening around us, from climate change to AI to inequality, tariffs, wars. It's endless. So it's a moment of truth for leadership in some forms. We know that the old playbook does not work anymore. But unfortunately, we're still measuring success using the old KPIs. In a sense, that switch hasn't flipped yet. But think about it, these days, 90% of leadership is ambiguous. Everywhere you look, like, from geopolitical to your business, to lead is a very complex action. And we forget that if we have to lead anybody, we have to start with self. So when I think of the word thriving, for me, it's not any longer about climbing up, but it's about going deep. Deep is the new growth. And for me, that means a few things. The first thing is to be aligned with your internal architecture. You have to be aligned with your values. You have to be aligned with the impact that you want to create. And you have to be service to that cause that you pursue. So you could rush and build your empire anywhere in the world, but we forget that you can't do that unless the kingdom within is built on strong foundation, right? So that navigational North Star is the first step to thriving leadership. Have that, whatever that is, which kind of guides you, keeps you keeps you on course. To thrive is when you can refuse the false dichotomy between profit and purpose. You want both, between speed and selling your soul. And I'm not saying you need to be slow, but you need to know what you're doing. You have to stay human in an age which is only glorifying speed and scale. Everything big doesn't have to be beautiful, but you have to know what choice you're making and why. So at the end, it's not just about more, but it's about meaning. And it's about meaning more than more, if that makes sense. You don't want to achieve, like I said, and have burnout in heels, right? You want to be fierce, but fluid. You want to be visionary, but vulnerable. It's not either or for me, it's both. And you have to make a conscious choice to lead or live in a way where you say, okay, I'm going to do it, but not in a way that sells my soul.
Where did you learn about this kind of leadership? And I say this because what you're describing is a way of leading that is very different than what is the norm and what is being legitimized often in the world, which is a more hierarchical, controlling, let's just get results no matter what cost type of leadership. Were there certain experiences that you had in your life that really taught you, wait a minute, I'm going to do this differently?
This is interesting because you're totally right. It's not happening, let's say, at Davos or in Fortune 500 boardrooms, but it should. But I think it's happening in small little pockets all around us, but not necessarily where you would expect to find it. So for me, it's happening in the margins and in the fringes. So by which I mean there are a lot of people who are doing groundbreaking work, but without the spotlight, right? I'm talking about teachers, school principals who led with hybrid learning when my kids were at school during COVID, but learning online. The frontline healthcare workers or young entrepreneurs who fill me with so much of hope and optimism now because they're really focused on building purpose-led companies. I mean, if your company does not have a reason to exist beyond making profit, do not. And I think that kind of guts is just mind-blowing. I do a lot of work around the world, and I get to work with leaders in tourism, travel, hospitality around the world, Africa, India, Latin America, Southeast Asia. And it's very optimistic that a lot of conversations now, including in boardrooms, are starting to ask these questions.
Yeah.
Because everything starts with awareness, and that's a good one. It's not necessarily happening because they want to have those conversations. It's happening because in a lot of instances, their children are asking them, what are you going to leave behind?
Yeah.
It's a very compelling pressure which we don't even acknowledge. You see it in governments where, let's take Bhutan as an example, right? They're not doing it for, how do you say, newspaper frontline messaging or news. They actually measure the success of a country based on your gross happiness index. So moving away from only GDP as a measure of success into how happy are your people? How fulfilled are they? And how much of that happiness, how much of it is holistic? In my industry, the big problem has been we have been so linear in the matrix where we use to measure success, right? We talk about the same things. Number of visitors or number of millions of visitors, ADR, how much money are you making? What was the contribution of tourism to the GDP? But that's so singular. It's time we make a leap into something which is a lot more holistic.
You're describing a form of leadership that is not necessarily a titled role, although it could be, but it's a way of being. How do you want to use your life energy to serve something greater than yourself? How do you want to use your life energy to support and kind of widen the circle of thriving for people and the planet? I'm curious for specifically the tourism and hospitality industry, what shifts would you like to see? Because you have so much expertise there, and you've mentioned that industry can be one, like all industries, that gets very narrowly focused on profitability and those types of KPIs, which are important. So this is not about not using those KPIs. It's about how can we expand so that we're really measuring what is the impact that we're having, what are the consequences of how we're working on people on the planet. So what would you like to see in those industries?
Specific to my industry again, and I'm sure it's true for many others, we have glorified charisma for so long that we have forgotten to give an equal weightage to character. I think one of the key things to thriving or the kind of leadership that you and I are talking about is you need to be really comfortable with not having all the answers. And we're not there. We're still going and doing things. It's a bit like an autopilot. I go back to religious scriptures, which be the Gita. So in the Gita, Arjun, he's in the battlefield,
Yeah.
he only wins, or the story turns when he surrenders completely and says, I don't know what to do. It's the same thing if you go to the Quran. The Quran teaches you a concept of sabr, which is patience. And that is not passive patience, Rennie, right? It's saying there is a bigger thing at play. So be patient in how the universe unfolds. I will probably not quote the Bible correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong. Is it something to the effect saying, be still and know that I'm God, which is saying you don't have all the answers. You're not the center of the world. You don't know everything else that's going on. So maybe it's a good way to really question and change your thinking from me as a center of the universe to something a lot more fluid with moving parts, interconnectedness, where every single thing that you do or implement in action has an impact which is significant on both people and planet. I think I wish leaders were more comfortable with unknowing as a leadership skill. It's the willingness to say, I don't fully understand, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here to learn.
There's so many things that you're saying that we're so aligned on, and I love it. One of those is realizing that you're not the center of the universe, that there's a big wide world out there. And there's some old models that looked at human beings, in fact, as the center of everything. And now
Right.
we're realizing, wait a minute, we're part of an ecosystem. We're part of something much greater than ourselves. Can we understand all of the interdependence in a whole new way? And if we understood that, how would we show up? How would we lead in a different way? You've also described leading in polarity. So knowing that there's this, there's that, and you have to hold both. So it's not just purpose, it's not just profit, it's holding both.
Correct.
So how do and you've also talked about humility and the
Mm.
importance of humility, which leading in polarity and understanding that you're not the center of things really brings this sense of being humble, but also
Okay.
having an internal sense of security. So there's humility and this internal framework, this internal knowing that you lead from. So I'm wondering how you bring these into your own leadership.
Some I'm successful with, some I'm not. As you were speaking, I was thinking of the word gratitude, right?
Mhm.
Because yes, humility, but gratitude for me, everything starts with gratitude, right? Because if you can't find meaning in the small moments, you're constantly going to be out there seeking validation. But if there's one thing that can really ground you, it's gratitude. It's the antidote to all things entitlement. I've seen leaders who are at the top of their game who start every meeting with an appreciation.
Mhm.
And that just sets the tone. It is what I call a complete cultural DNA indoctrination. It
Yes.
just changes everything. And so you have that on one end of the spectrum, and then you have CEOs who don't even acknowledge a handwritten thank you note. For me, that speaks of what it means to be really grateful, because if you are grateful, you are hopeful. Also think about it. So in my work, I'm advising a lot of countries who are in crisis, which means that there are big problems, but not infinite budgets. But when you're grateful, it suddenly shifts the whole narrative. When you look at things with hope, and then you bring in a service mentality, because you're not doing to just achieve that ambition, you're doing because you're in service to the community or to the next generation or your cause, whatever that is. So I think it's the perfect combination if you have gratitude and a service mentality. And it's something I used to ground with all the time, because if you're not in service to something, you can become narcissistic very quickly.
Do you have a gratitude practice that you like the most? Is there something that you do that you feel like this really helps me begin my day in a way that's grateful, or it helps me begin a meeting in a way that's grateful, or it helps me connect with a deep sense of gratitude as I am opening to a new project? Or is there a practice that works for you?
So something which I am trying to get better at, but I don't do very well, is learning to pause. Because again, we're going at 200 miles an hour, and we forget that you need that pause, and it has to be engineered where you say, I need to pick up my pieces. And that pause is where I come back to what really matters: health, my kids, family, and the rest can happen and be built on that. So it's not that I start my day with a journal. I do say thanks when I go to bed. And that's literally 2 minutes where I say, okay, I'm just grateful to be having the opportunity to be on stage, not to shine, but to be of service. I have the opportunity to be in this room because I know others are not. And that gives me a huge responsibility to make it count, because I'm then representing them and speaking for the voices who are not in the room. But specific to the work, look, for me, I always say it's about coherence, which is to say what you believe and how you live has to be aligned. If that doesn't, you can't lead. You can only manage. And you might get through your entire life by managing. And when your delusion and denial can be your two best friends, but you're just managing. You're not leading. In my work, again, it shows up how I build, right? Because you're not just helping governments, you're not just consulting, you're helping governments reimagine tourism and travel, not just as an economic engine, but as a human and planetary catalyst. And that's a huge responsibility. If it's in the private sector, I'm helping companies pivot from profit obsession to purpose orientation. And it's not one or the other, exactly as you said. You need both. Because guess what? If you're purpose oriented, you will have more young people want to work for you. They will stay longer. One feeds into the profitability of the other, if that makes sense. It's not a weekend ritual. It has to be baked into how you kind of live, like how you mentor women, or how I design tourism models, or how we take care of our own nervous system, because that's important too, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting when you bring up you can manage your whole life, and then denial can be your friend in that. And you can deny living or leading with a deeper sense of purpose, a deeper sense of calling, a deeper sense of service. Some of these words for people start to feel almost heavy, like, oh my gosh, I've got to find my purpose. Oh, I've got to find a calling. But it can be as simple as what lights you up? What lights you up? What helps you? What can you bring your joy to? What can you bring your energy to? What feels meaningful? You brought the word meaning up earlier. What just feels meaningful? What feels of service that's not always about you, but a way you can use your talents, your gifts, your energies? And it's interesting, our team has done executive or team coaching work with thousands of executives around the world. I've been in business for 26 years, so it's been a long time. The pattern I see the most with people who don't ask those questions is they get to a certain age and they start asking, is this all there is? Why did I spend my life this way? But what about my relationships with my children? I lost that. I lost that opportunity. So there's so many missed opportunities that happen when we're not looking holistically at what does it mean for me? What does it mean for us to thrive? And you're really bringing that up on a grand scale when you're talking with a tourism industry, a government, to say, what would it mean for us to not just be using tourism for our economy, which of course is important, but to support the growth and capacity development of people? That's a whole different calling.
Oh, absolutely. It's not easy, right, Renee? Because courage is a virtue which is not really fully understood, but it's actually the one virtue which defines every other virtue and quality. And that takes a lot of guts to be able to challenge mainstream, meaningless jargon. I'm sure we've sat in enough meetings where we know what is paying lip service and what is real leadership. And a lot of people are very happy to skim through the surface. The ability to question, call out the fluff, is something that we need to see happen more. And that means you will lose out on things, will lead to heartbreaks, it will lead to losses. I mean, I've missed out on opportunities. I've been kicked out of boards, questioning things, speaking too much. But then it goes back to the original thing. Achievement is meaningless without integrity. You don't want to lead a life where you got to your ambition, but you had to sell your soul for it. It's not easy.
It's not easy, but boy, it's so fulfilling.
Yes.
It's so fulfilling to feel like you lived this time on the planet really in a way that you were using yourself to support good, whatever that would be.
And we also have to be free of judgment, which I know we are. And I mean that collectively, because everyone goes through that journey and arrives at that pathway for themselves. Till the time you get to that stage where you are comfortable and brave enough to say, I'm going to refuse something that looks good on paper because
Mhm.
it's not aligned with me, my internal and external architecture. You just have to take your time.
Yeah, sometimes the shiny actually is the path
Yes.
for a while. And then you say, okay, the shiny isn't for me anymore. And I need to go my own way. But as you said before, and as I think we agree on, there really are so many people around this planet. I wish I had the number, but I have this deep belief that there are so many people on this planet that have already or are making that shift, are
Yeah.
more and more questioning the shiny. Whatever the shiny is, are starting to question that and say, there is another way to be with each other on this world, in this world. And there's another way to lead in a way where all people can thrive or at least have the opportunity to make different choices for
Correct.
themselves. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. As you have traveled around the world, who else do you think Renee, you absolutely should interview this person because they are the embodiment of what we're talking about.
Listen, I can give you names of CEOs, people who I sit on boards with, chairs, but can I be a bit controversial here?
Sure.
And I say, don't look for the usual suspects at all, because what you're doing is so much bigger than names who could make a difference, who are the usual suspects, or the names who have done the podcasts and interviews before. I genuinely believe the wisdom we need is not in the boardrooms. That's not to say it's hidden or something. It's there, but it's been drowned out.
Hmm.
I'm talking about people who are not on stage, but they are the ones who are really holding the world together. School teachers. I speak to some of my kids, and they're some of the best leaders that I've met. First generation founders of startups, purpose driven startups, who are actually doing unbelievably groundbreaking work. Their resilience is off the charts. Every time you speak to someone, you're like, oh my God. Sports people, athletes, especially the ones who have lost, because they know bouncing back is so much beyond what winning could ever get them. I've spoken to people who are from the indigenous communities who have been regenerative, which is a new terminology that we've coined, and we say it's trendy, but they've been regenerative for generations.
Mm.
And they're passing on that wisdom through generation. So a tribal elder who guides the next generation. I also think there is joy in speaking to people who work selflessly. The
Mhm.
janitor who keeps the light on, teacher who stays on because the child hasn't finished eating, the nurse at the hospice who is really seeing the end of life for a lot of people. And I go back to again people who are keepers of faith. A nun who's waking up at 4 a.m. and praying for the benefit of the world is
Mhm.
not doing it because she's going to be reaping the benefits of it. A Muslim father who's teaching his son about the joy of mercy is not doing it for an immediate return. For this monk who is sitting in Vipassana or guru in Ganges is not doing that because they are going to get a check at the end of the meditation.
Yeah.
They're doing it because someone has to. And I think these guys are the ones with the most amazing, sensational stories who are there, but just not have been told.
I love it that you're talking about the people who are knitting our world together
Yes,
and are keeping our world knitted together, especially at the times, and we are in one of these times, these periods where things feel frayed as far as the stitching.
they're
And
also people who have walked through fire, right? So
yeah,
they've been burned, but
yeah,
it's damaged their souls.
yeah.
So we're not missing examples. We're missing that clarity of purpose. Like I said, like I'm a bad work in progress. I wish I had the intentionality to turn off my mobile every given opportunity so it will give me the forced pause. I'm not there yet. I'm aware. But they're able to meditate without light, without food for 7 hours or
Mm.
longer. We have so much to learn from people like that.
I so agree. I love how you flip all of it on its head. And thank you. Thank you. Anything else that you would want, just anyone who would be listening to this podcast or watching the video, anything else you would just want them to hear?
I guess that we all need to build a new leadership operating system, one which shamelessly prioritizes healing over hustle, systemic change over silos, doing independent things. And I think, again, leadership in the next chapter will not be coming from people who speak the loudest. It will come from people who have the clearest soul and mind. And that needs you to be aligned. The sooner we all get there, I think the sooner we benefit the world. So thank you, Rennie, for reminding us that we need to have these conversations and that thriving, most importantly, isn't about success. It's about significance, right?
Thank you for your energy, your wisdom, your way of being in the world. Yeah,
Thank
it's so important because you are on the journey and you're role modeling for everybody else.
Well, thank you for creating the space where I can reflect on how we all live.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time, Aradhana. I so appreciate it more than you can know.